guys hear me too? Good? All right. We're all
Okay.
set.
So let's get going and talk about the myth of the genius programmer.
Hooray. But first, let's talk about who we are first. So you have a little background about, we've already begun to reveal our history. Well, you start.
Well, my name is Brian Fitzpatrick. Most people call me Fitz.
My name is Ben Collins-Sussman, and people call me Ben Collins-Sussman.
And we are known for, we worked on Subversion for many years. We also are two of the three authors of the Subversion Reference Manual, which you can find for free on scnbook.org.
And then after working on Subversion, we both went to Google. And at Google, we started, we ported Subversion over to Google's Big Table technology, and then we launched the Google Code project hosting site. Have people heard of that? Has anyone seen open source? Yeah, it's similar to SourceForge. So that's what I manage now. And you manage other teams now, right?
Yeah, I manage a team in Chicago called the Data Liberation Front. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. Dataliberation.org. We basically make sure that everybody can get your data out of Google because we don't want to lock anybody in.
Not the People's Front for Data Liberation.
Not to be confused with the People's Front for Data Liberation. That's right. So those guys are total splitters. But so anyway, so we're at Google. We do a lot of different things there. We do a lot of different talks, and we give a lot of talks lately, not on particularly technical issues, but what we sort of call social engineering.
Right. Somebody came up to me and said, you know, I really like that you guys do this because if I wanted super technical talks, I can open up the manuals, but the kind of stuff you guys talk about, which is usually psychology, I suppose, is a little more interesting, and it's not something you come across very often if you're studying computer science, right?
Fix your mic.
So, fix my. Oh, hey, there's my mic.
Okay, so now
Nice.
we're going to make you guys work a little bit here. We have some questions for you guys as well. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. We're not going to. It's not a quiz or anything like that. There's no grade for this. But how many people in this room write code entirely by themselves?
It's okay. That's what students do, right?
Okay.
It's your assignment.
All right. How many people write codes who work in teams to write code?
Now, is that just because your teachers force you to? Well, maybe.
Yeah. How many people do that willingly? I guess we should ask. Go ahead.
How many people have ever done code review? Like, you know, had your code reviewed or reviewed somebody else's code? Cool. How many people like that? How many people are afraid of feeling stupid or looking stupid? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, good.
All right, we're in the right room. Okay. So this is sort of a prelude to what we're going to talk about, but we like to give a little preface to this. These are our opinions. We are version control systems, collaborative development environment geeks, and you know, if our talk angers you, or if you like it, or if you're walking out here steaming mad, that's great. That means we've done our job. If you don't care, or you fall asleep, or you wind up on the Facey Spaces or something, then clearly we're failing.
Or they can just get their own talk.
Yeah, you can get your own talk, even though this is your university. But
all right, well, let's start with some quotes.
Quotes.
Right? Just we're going to introduce the subject.
Okay.
These are actual quotes from actual people we have met. We won't read them to you, though. Let you read them.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go to the next
quote.
slide. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, one more. Awesome. All right, so do you guys see a common theme here? Right? What's the theme? Insecurity, right? What is really going on here? It's that people are afraid to let anybody see anything that they've ever done that isn't perfect. And that's sort of, well, we're going to talk about why we think that's a problem and why some of you might not want to participate in. Let's move on to the myth.
So the myth, we have one more quote for you to read. I know we're making you guys work a lot here, but there's one more. So before we get to exactly the myth, we want to talk about some related things. The first thing is, why do people buy products that are endorsed by celebrities? Okay, Michelle Obama wore a certain dress to the inauguration night. Next day, it sells out. Okay, Michael Jordan has Air Jordan shoes. And
Why do people buy them?
Why do people buy them? Are they going to be able to play basketball like Michael Jordan?
Right, and I think it's what we're pointing at here is there is a tendency in human nature to find celebrities, to create celebrities, and then idolize them and try to imitate them, right? And even in the world of computer programming, particularly in open source, we have celebrities, right? We've got Linus, we've got Guido, who wrote Python, we've got Bill Gates, right? We've got Kernighan and Pike. All these people, I mean, they do deserve a huge amount of credit, but it's rare to say that, you know, did Linus really write all of Linux by himself? No, right? You know, did Guido write all of Python by himself?
At the very beginning, maybe.
At the beginning, right? These guys, they kicked it off. They got something going, right? But at this point, you know, only a small fraction of the code actually belongs to those people.
Well, their reputation now is much larger than life.
Yes.
Right?
Right. So the truth of the matter is that geniuses are incredibly rare, right? And it might be our fantasy. When we look at these people we idolize and say, I want to be like Linus, or I want to be like some great programmer who basically goes off, works in a cave, comes up with a brilliant idea, implements it perfectly, comes out of the cave and says, "Hey, look at me! I am a genius!" Right? Look, give me the glory, right? And it's a natural human desire.
Well, I mean, you want to be, everybody secretly, whether you're going to admit it or not, wants to be seen as a genius by your peers, okay? But the way that people behave, a lot of this comes out of insecurity, okay?
That's the other side of the coin.
It's the other side of the coin, right? You don't want to ever show a mistake. You don't want anyone to ever see you fail. And you desperately want people to see you as clever, right? I mean, we have these little clever anecdotes we're saying here. We'd love for you to think that we're clever, whether we are or not, right?
Well, the classic example, right, is why is it so hard to stop and ask for directions, right? It's like admitting failure. Even if it's a complete stranger, you feel silly, you feel foolish. And in the same way, when people are getting their code reviewed, or when they're participating on a team, whether it be at your corporation or an open source project, it is scary to write code and then show it to your peers, right? Because you don't want them to think you're dumb. And so why is this a problem? Like, okay, fine. So maybe we're pointing out the obvious here, but why should we care about this problem at all?
Well, for starters, it inhibits progress, okay? The whole quote you've probably heard before, many eyes make all bugs shallow, all right? So if you're off working on a bug by yourself, spinning your wheels, digging into it or something, you're inhibiting the progress of the team that you're on, okay? And in addition to that, if you're working on all this stuff out in the middle of nowhere, the code quality is going to remain low because we talked about code review. If code review isn't happening early and often, we're going to have actually lower quality code. And that's why at Google we have a strong policy on code review. You have to have your code reviewed before it's even committed in our repository.
It's enforced, right?
Yeah.
So has anyone ever heard of the bus factor? That phrase, increase the bus factor? All right, we got a couple of people. So what is the bus factor?
Okay, so the bus factor is the number of people in your project that have to get hit by a bus before you're left in a world of crap. Okay? So if there's only one person that knows a particular part of your code, and they get hit by a bus, suddenly you have a whole section of code that nobody understands.
Now keep in mind, when we say hit by a bus, I mean, there's a lot of reasons people leave projects. They might get hit by a bus. People get married, people have kids, people move away, they change jobs, right? Sometimes they just lose interest, right? So, I mean, you have to operate, if you're working on a team, in a mentality that, hey, we need to spread this knowledge around. It's very easy for people to get into these ruts of specialization and say, this is the part of the program I know, this is my role on the team, I'm the only one who can maintain this code, and hey, come on
down.
Sit down.
We're really friendly people.
Honest.
If you don't come down, we'll go give the talk up there if you'd like. Come on, it's really okay. We're pretty informal people.
Yeah.
We show up to things late all the time. I almost showed up. Anyway.
Yeah, so it's easy. People become territorial over their code. This is my code. I understand it. I own it. I don't want anyone else changing this code, right? Because it's mine. It's my job security. It's my role on the team. But it's actually really bad for the team, right? Because it's a bus factor of 1. And so we actually will say this to people on our team at work. We'll say, hey, why don't you go help him with that thing to increase the bus factor on that part of the project? And people know what we mean. And it's insurance. So let's go back to what we were
back to inhibiting progress, okay? The other thing about going off into a cave and working on code for a long time is there's a high risk of working on the wrong thing, okay? Or having to start over. And there's all this conventional wisdom, which I definitely question, and most of us do these days, of it's better to work in an office because engineers can work for longer periods of time with less distraction and that sort of thing. The problem is that if you're working a long time on less distraction, but you're working on the wrong thing, it doesn't matter how many lines of code you write, okay? But it's all about getting a tight feedback loop, okay? How many of you guys write code? Let's just have a quick survey of that, okay? How many people compile after writing 5 lines of code? After 10? After 100? How many people write 5,000 lines of code and then compile it to see if it works?
Good luck with that.
Okay.
All right.
You see me after, I want to borrow your punch card deck, okay?
Yeah.
Right? But your compiler is a way of getting feedback. It's constant. You run it frequently. You want to see how things are going, right?
But that same analogy applies to working with other people on your team, right? Hey, I have an idea. Talk about it with somebody. Hey, I've started a design doc. Show it to somebody right away. Change it, right? Get it going. Hey, I've written a little bit of code. Review this first step in this thing that I'm implementing, right? It increases the bust factor. It makes sure everybody agrees that I'm working on the right thing. Catch problems early, right? It's a tight feedback loop with your peers. And this, maybe you have to do this at work, but I mean, this is something you should be doing, even if you're just doing open source work for fun, right? You should be getting into a community and getting feedback early and often.
Right, but if you're in that cave, your individual progress is also inhibited, right? You don't learn as quickly. It's harder to improve your skills because you're not getting faster feedback. You're not learning from other people that you work with, okay?
This is a problem that's not unique to computer science. In fact, I think you see it in a lot of other sciences, like grad students I know in mathematics or anthropology, right? Everyone's got to publish or perish. So they do this research, they clutch it to their chest, they don't show anybody anything, they want to get it into a journal, and then they discover, oh, 3 other people already did this. Or, hey, if I just asked my buddy, I could have gone off on a different track that was not a waste of time. I mean, it's kind of a continuous tragedy. We're sort of, with computer science, it's a little easier to avoid, right? We're expected to work in teams perhaps a little more. So.
Right. You lost your mic? Is it dead? Is it totally out? We need a new battery?
Come on. Hold on.
Does it just move?
Well, just clip it to my shirt.
No, I think it's dead. You have a battery?
Hello. Hey, it's actually dead. Awesome.
Please hold. See, this kind of stuff happens all the time. We should have checked our own batteries, but we didn't. Can you get it open?
I think it requires.
No, it says you press. Read it. What does it say?
Press.
It says open. So that way.
That's what I thought.
There. All right. Anybody know how to figure out how to open anything? You got it? Which way is it going? Okay. Google it.
Check. Oh. What the heck?
All right.
Awesome.
So there's an example of failure, Ben. Did you learn something from that?
I'm so mortified and embarrassed.
Ben's a sound designer in his spare time.
Don't judge me.
But you learned that just now. You're going to check that battery next time. All right. So we have another quote for you guys to read. So here we go. Okay. So the point of this is that even if you think you're a genius, working well with others will make or break you, okay? In the business world, in writing software, like attracts like, okay? If you come to work with a team, and these are people that work well with each other, you're going to be a productive team. Now, there are plenty of dysfunctional teams out there that write software, okay? That they scream at each other, and they thump their chest, and they yell, and they insult, and they criticize, and they'll revert somebody's commit just to show them who's boss. And they do get software written, but it's at an incredibly high cost of productivity.
Well, it's just extremely inefficient.
It's inefficient.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the one big thing I guess I would like to stress that you might not learn just being in school is that programming is an inherently collaborative activity, right? And you kind of lose sight of that if you're just doing assignment after assignment for class. And so I hope professors are giving you chances to collaborate on things, because that is probably the most important skill you'll ever get going into a degree in software engineering, if that's what most people go into.
Well, how many widely used, widely successful pieces of software are written by one person?
Well, can you name one?
Can you name one? And Meta font does not count.
I see someone said BitTorrent.
See, someone did BitTorrent again.
They got us.
But that was the original version of BitTorrent. Now, the software that people use nowadays isn't exactly the one single piece of software that was written by just one person. You wrote a piece of software. Emacs? An Emacs-like editor? An OS.
Nice.
Okay. So, in any case, but I'm talking about things that are broadly used by millions and millions of people, okay? Oh, we have another person. Okay, tech and Metafont don't count.
It's not widely used.
Not widely used.
Well, I don't count, the world's grad students as a gigantic success. Right?
Apologies to the world's grad students in the room.
That is a tiny segment of the computer-using population, right? So I don't.
Okay, all right. Okay. So let's move along here. We've got a lot more to talk about here.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a trap here, all right? There's a trap of this insecurity and going off into this cave and trying to come out like some genius programmer. So how do we avoid this? Okay.
First, lose the ego. Now, I mean, not everybody has a giant ego, but the very first thing you need to do when entering a team is to stop thinking, well, I am the most important person on this team. What people think about me is the most important thing. You need to think as a team. Have a community ego, right? For example, at least the open source projects and the teams that I've seen, that I've been part of, the ones that are the most successful are the ones where there is a collective sense of pride, right? where people don't even put their names on the source files. They just sort of, they contribute code, they work together, and if there's some outside threat to the project, they respond as a community, right? They don't have individual egos being assuaged left and right.
Right.
The Apache Software Foundation is a good example.
Right.
Are you serious?
Can you pull a battery out of there?
Yeah. Which way did you take it out? The small side. The small one goes on the outside. The small one goes on the outside.
Okay. Clearly, nothing else is going to go wrong, right? All right.
Awesome.
This goes in the back. Okay. All right. So much for my ego. The Apache Software Foundation. I've been a member of the Apache Software Foundation for a long time, and it's not about the code. It's about the communities that are built around the code. Companies come to us all the time and say, "Hey, we want to open source this huge pile of code, and here it is." And we say, "Forget it.
Don't want dump trucks.
Don't want
dump
a
trucks of
dump
code.
truck full of rotten, crappy code." Because it's just going to rot. Nothing's going to happen unless there's people maintaining it, responding to bug reports, building new features. It's just going to go nowhere.
Has to be a community, a real community around it.
And there's another thing to learn, and this actually takes a long time for some people to learn, is that criticism is not a bad thing. Okay, it should be given politely, it should be taken politely, and it should be constructive. Okay, this sucks is not constructive criticism. It may be fun to say, but it's not something that's going to help anybody.
But on the flip side, the thing we always tell people who are a little bit nervous about is we say, you are not your code, right? It is okay for you to criticize your own code, right? And you are not a lesser person. Maybe you're just learning, right? And that's fine. It's okay to learn.
Well, you can live in denial and not get any criticism about your code and think that it's great and it's just going to suck. Or
you have an anecdote about this.
Oh, I do have an anecdote. So a really good friend of mine who still works at Apple, he left Apple for a while to go work at this small company as an engineering manager. And he went in and they were using version control. And the engineering director said, we really got to get this team more productive and writing better code, so I really want you to focus on that. So he set up a little hook in their version control system that would send out diffs after anything was checked in. And he started doing code reviews. So some code would come in and he'd send code off and say, hey, this should be over here, you missed this, have you considered this is null, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, was very polite about it.
He was very polite about it, and just the kind of thing that we were used to doing in the past. And after about a week and a half of this, the director of engineering pulls him into his office and says, we have to talk. He says, oh, I thought things were going pretty well. He said, well, I've been talking to the guys, and all this constant criticism stuff's a real downer. You really got to lay off this stuff and let people write their code. And
cultural failure.
Yeah, I think he only worked there for another month, basically. But I mean, this was it's a cultural thing, really, and but it's really important to understand that criticism is a great way it's a very fast way to learn, right? There's only one way that I know of that's faster to learn than to get direct constructive criticism.
Fail quickly, over and over and over again. We always talk about failure being an option. It's okay. Well, I mean, failure is an option as long as you're not failing on the same thing over and over again. Then something's wrong, right? But at Google, we talk about this all the time. Do something, get it out there, watch it fail, learn, try, iterate, do it again, right? So, I mean, I guess you can come up with a lot of anecdotes about this. One that I have is a few years ago I started learning to play banjo. I would play in jams, bluegrass jams, and I was terrified when they would call on me to do a solo because I didn't know what I was doing. And one of the guys took me aside and he said, half the battle is just not being afraid to sound like an idiot. So I said, oh, you're right. And sure enough, he was right. As soon as I stopped caring, I started playing better and better and better.
Like an idiot.
Yeah, I sounded like an idiot, but over, more and more, it didn't matter anymore, right? They were my friends, so what did I care? Yeah. And he got better and better, right? I embraced the failure, and I sort of expected it and was okay with that, right? So that's how you learn.
Right, but your first instinct is to avoid it, right?
Right. Try to never come near it, right? It's too unbearable.
Right. Another anecdote or urban legend about this is the executive that makes a business mistake and loses his company $10 million. Comes into work the next morning, he hasn't slept at all, he's really upset. First thing his secretary says is the CEO wants to see you. So he's like, all right, well, it was great working here, this is it. Walks into the CEO office, the guy's like, close the door. Closes the door, he comes in. He said, here's my resignation. I suppose you want to fire me. And the CEO looks at him and says, fire you? I just spent $10 million training you. Okay? So Another example that failure is something that's a mistake that you learn that you're never going to do again. Right now, you might notice, you probably can't see my laptop, but it's plugged in over here, okay? Ben and I gave this talk at Google I/O at huge conference to a room full of 500-600 people. And we forgot to plug the laptop in halfway through the battery, and the laptop died. So we learned about batteries on laptops, but not the more general case involving batteries in remote microphones.
Yes.
But so that could be possibly failing in the same thing, and we're completely losing.
So, I mean, we mentioned this already, but there's the other side of embracing failure is to iterate fast, right? So in fact, we put it together, we say, fail fast, and then do it again. That's the classic phrase. And the other thing is, don't try to erase your tracks, right? Fail, embrace the failure, iterate again, but document what happened. And don't hide that from people, right? Other people can learn from your mistakes too. If you put up, say, here's what didn't work, here's what didn't work.
Well,
that's fine.
One example of that is design discussions on mailing lists. People talk about things and they maybe go off and explore it, and then a year later someone will come in and start wanting to do the same thing again. So you can either get in a huge discussion with them about this, or you can just point them to this previous discussion and say, look, we had this idea a year ago, we tried it in code, here's our samples, blah, blah, blah. Go look there and take a check on it.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay.
Great. Practicing. There isn't a lot to say here. This is more of iteration, another variant of iterating quickly. But one thing you notice is that as you iterate and you practice, the degree of failure gets less and less. Or I should say, you fall, but you don't fall this far each time, which is something to keep in mind. It's a nice side effect of iterating.
And another way is to be a small fish. Okay, if you only work with people who are your junior, it's harder to improve your skills and to learn. You can typically learn from people that aren't at your level or higher. But if you are on the bottom of the heap working with a bunch of brilliant, smarter than you senior people, it's a great opportunity to learn, especially if they're willing to give you good constructive criticism.
It's actually hard. I mean, it's hard to do this, right? Because people get into these situations where they get really comfortable, being the top dog, and you don't have to worry about anybody challenging you, and you're always right. And then you just kind of go into stasis, right? You just stop learning because everyone's your junior all the time. So look around for situations. See if you ever fall into that situation, right? It's a little scary to break yourself out of it, but it's also the only way to get better and to grow.
Right. So another thing that isn't often talked about is that if you want to influence other people, you have to be open to being influenced, okay? So the more open you are to this, the more influence actually you can have on other people. People typically don't want to listen to what you're saying unless you show that you're willing to learn and listen, hear what they have to say, and be open to consideration that someone else might have a good idea sometime.
Yeah, changing your mind once in a while or being persuaded actually it's a massive increase in credibility.
Some of the best leaders that I know, the people that I've worked with and followed, have been done exactly this. They're always open to being influenced.
Yeah. But another side of this is also being vulnerable. And this is sort of being willing to admit in front of your peers that you messed up. You supported the wrong side of the argument. You made a bad judgment call. And it's okay, right? I mean, in the short term, you may feel like you're admitting that you're weak or that you're incompetent somehow. But let me tell you, if you do this on a regular basis over the long term, everybody will interpret it as being strong. Wow, what an amazingly resilient, robust person that they just admit their mistakes and they're not afraid. And then over the long run, you get this, again, great credibility.
Wait, if you're incapable of being vulnerable, you don't have the ability to compromise or collaborate with people. And again, we talked about collaboration and the importance of working with other people, right?
So let's take a brief little detour now, talk about tools, right? Tools are really important. We've been talking about how to behave in a group, but I want to talk about something that people have not necessarily noticed before, which is how do tools affect your behavior when you're working collaboratively in software? So there's this famous saying, right, that you can't solve a social problem with a technical solution. And there are a lot of examples of this. One example is, people constantly trying to implement DRM to stop people from copying digital things, right?
Wait a minute. People haven't stopped copying digital things?
Oh, DRM is perfectly successful. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. I thought so.
Right. What's another example? My favorite example, since we're version control geeks, is people who want to, when they're using a version control system like Subversion, to start implementing sysadmins, start implementing path-based access control. This person's allowed to commit here, and this person's allowed to commit here, and blah, blah, blah. And they sort of create these perfect little rules about who's allowed to do what. And my feeling is always like, well, why are you creating such complexity, right? It's making you feel secure, right? Like you're implementing these very technical rules, but it's actually a social problem, right? If you've got a community of people with permission to commit to a repository, and somebody commits to the wrong place, you're going to notice it, right? Everyone's going to get an email that it happened, right? Assuming you get diff emails sent to you.
Code reviews.
And you do code reviews, right? If it was an accident, you just undo it. It's a version control system, right? No big deal. If it wasn't an accident, why is that person working with you at all? Kick them out, right? Revoke their access. So it's really one of these things. It's a social problem that is easily enforced through social pressure, not through these technological restrictions. So that's just a couple of examples, I guess, of
right.
You know?
And endless spam arms race is another example. So, but this isn't always the case. Usually, you can't solve a social issue with a technological solution. There's some examples where you can influence it and make it more positive. So basically with certain defaults, okay? Like for example, on Google Code, we discovered that, I don't know, like 4 times out of 5, someone would report a bug and never leave an email address or any way to contact them, or they wouldn't CC themselves on the bug.
So the bug was almost always worthless, right? Because it's very rare when a bug comes in.
With all the information.
With all the information you ever need, and you're done, right? It just never happens. So we decided to force people to actually sign in to their Google account in order to file a bug or comment on a bug.
Right.
It's a little bit of a barrier to entry, but it makes a huge impact, right? Now that is an example of a technical solution having a huge social impact.
Another problem is, one of the biggest problems with open source code, and engineers don't think about this often, is what's called license proliferation. Okay? The interaction of multiple licenses is incredibly complicated and makes many lawyers many millions of dollars. Having over 100 licenses that actually qualify as open source is, believe it or not, a problem for people that want to actually use the software who didn't write it.
Or just combine components.
Right.
I mean,
if I combine the LGPL software with Apache software and MIT software and some Berkeley and some public domain, and the lawyers just explode and say you can't use anything, right? So we took a stand on this, and we limited the choice of licenses on Google Code to, I think it's like 8 or 9 now.
Yeah.
We widened up a little bit.
That's it. I mean,
it covers 95% of open source software.
We lose some projects because we don't allow their license to exist, but we think, for every project that we lose, there's probably 5 projects who we persuade to just use a standard license. Please, don't write your own, Yeah. And I think that's a net win for the community.
Right, but defaults really do matter a lot, okay? You should always examine how any tool you're using to collaborate with other people behaves out of the box. I mean, this isn't necessarily going to fix your core social issues if you have problems, but it does have a heavy influence on our behaviors.
Let's look at some examples of how tools behave out of the box and how they affect you. One example is email diffs, encouraging code review. Our friend Carl Fogel, who wrote a lot of CVS and Subversion with us, he was noticing 2 different projects. One project got code review all the time. Somebody would commit, an email diff would be sent out to all the participants, and then immediately a review would come back. They'd respond. There's something in my inbox. Oh, let's see what they wrote. Easy, easy, easy. Fix this, done. And this other project, emails would go out, but there were no code reviews coming back, and he couldn't figure out why. And I think it turned out that it was because in the second project, I think it was using a different mail program. It was CVS-based or something. But what happened was 2 emails would go out. One would be an email describing the change, sort of the log message, and then like 20 minutes later, another email would arrive with the actual diffs. And it was so hard to put the 2 together that people just wouldn't even bother, right? The barrier to entry was too high.
Right. Some of that was cultural, but
it is, right. But this is an example of a tool's default behavior completely changing the behavior of the project. There's no code review going on suddenly.
Another example of something that made huge changes, and another quick poll here. How many people in the room have heard of CVS, the version control system? Okay, we gave a talk at a different ACM group, and I asked that, and everybody in the room raised their hand. And another Google engineer sitting over here says, I think they're thinking about the drugstore.
And it was true.
So then I qualified that, and one guy in the back raised his hand.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, there's a lot of things are attributed to the success of open source in the world and what really got it growing. Some people say it's Linux. Some people say it's GNU. Some people say it's GNU Linux, and a whole bunch of different things. But in the mid-1990s, or early 1990s, if you wanted to collaborate on an open source project, you got a tarball from someone, and you would start hacking on it, and someone maintained, the official tarball, and you would submit them a patch maybe, or
Diffs would go back and forth.
But it was really difficult to track the changes that you had. Now, if you knew somebody, and this is for people who weren't trusted part of the project. If you were part of the project, you got a login on a machine to telnet in, not even SSH, to telnet in the machine, check out the code on CVS, and then you had this incredible power of doing live diffs on the repository.
Real version control.
Okay?
Right.
But there was an incredible amount of trust you had to give somebody to give them shell access to your machine. Now, CVS P-Server came along, which was a simple network protocol that allowed people to do this remotely, right, through CVS instead of having shell access to your machine. And so this was a great big step ahead because the barrier to trust lowered a little bit there. You didn't have to give people shell access, but you still had to give them access to your repository. And suddenly, our friend Carl wrote the CVS P-Server anonymous version, okay, where anyone could check out source code with no credentials whatsoever, okay? This was, in my opinion, in our opinion, I think, a defining moment in open source because at that point, anyone in the world could check your code out, look at it, maybe find a bug, fix the bug, send in a tiny patch with almost no difficulty.
Yeah.
So
I think it was the huge catalyst that sort of started open source as a typical, easy to do for everyone, right? Suddenly everyone had the tools to make it trivial without shell accounts everywhere.
Right.
So I guess I can mention this really quick. There's one other really quick example, which is, have people used distributed version control like Git or Mercurial or Bazaar, Darks, Monotone, Arc? Yeah, it goes on and on. So what's neat about that is it's also it's a tool that has an interesting default behavior, right? On the one hand, it lowers the barrier to participation even more, right? You don't even have to be a member of the open source project to get the entire repository, the entire history, and have the exact same version control tools as the maintainers of the project, which is awesome. It levels the playing field, right? So you can say it lowers the barrier to entry. It's also got this, it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's got the other side where it's a little bit weird in that the very first thing you do when you use distributed version control is you fork the entire project into a cave. And you start working in a cave, right? And now you have to deliberately decide to share your changes with people. So I don't know how it balances out, but on the whole, it seems to be helping the open source world. So, but it is interesting to watch those default behaviors and see well, what's going to happen. So what's the moral of the story?
The moral of the story is pay attention to default behaviors of your tools and ask yourself, what kind of social behavior is this encouraging between myself and my team? So the next big question that people have is, okay, so I'm ready to collaborate. When do I do this, okay? How do I balance private work with public collaboration? Where's that sort of sweet spot where I can, not wind up talking myself sick and be completely finished, okay? How do I get people to help and write everything for me?
Let's see our scientific graph.
This is a scientific graph. We spent minutes researching this. So you have an initial idea, okay, and then you prototype it, and after that is the point at which you involve collaborators, okay? If you don't have an idea and a prototype, you're going to wind up talking too much and trying to decide the direction. If you advertise for help, you're going to wind up getting people that aren't interested in doing what you do, and they want to steer your project their way, okay? So this is sort of firmly defining a direction before doing this. Now, to be clear, you don't have to hide before this happens, okay? You don't have to just completely go into a cave and privately come up with the idea and the prototype. You just don't advertise it, right? Yeah. You sort of keep it quiet and under wraps and that sort of thing. After that, of course, you write a whole lot of code and then take over the world, okay?
So the hard question is, where do you put that third milestone, that part, the involve collaborators part? Where does that go on the slider? And you don't want it to be too early or too late. Let's look at the case of being too late. Too late means you finished the entire thing and now you're just showing everybody, hey, check it, that's too late, right? Because why is this a problem? There's a huge risk. If you've never shown this to anybody, if you have been working in a cave, you might have gone down the completely wrong path. You might have duped somebody else's work, reinvented the wheel. You might have made some horrible design choices that are it's way too late to undo them, right? You've got code, no one's going to want to participate because your code's not reviewable. No one's going to review 50,000 lines of code for fun, right? It's what we call a code bomb, right? And nobody wants to participate in that. And it's also hard because nobody is going to feel involved. If you invite them to participate in something that's already done and polished, all the decisions are made, what reason would they have to get involved, right? They're not going to feel like they have any stake, any way to change the direction of the project or have any real influence on it.
So if you want to attract, let's say you got a bus, okay? You're driving the bus. If you want to attract other people that want to drive the bus, you have to get in a little earlier. If you just want to attract people that are going to ride the bus and follow you, then maybe you do want to wait later until all the big decisions are made. But it depends, again, it's a lot to do with who you want to work with and what kind of working model you have.
Let's do the flip side.
Too early. Okay, if you have no running code at all, it's too early. There's a huge risk of wasting everyone's time. You don't have a clear direction. You're going to wind up in design by committee. It's a huge gumption sink. Individual creativity is stifling, and you're just going to waste a lot of time arguing. Okay?
Well, I mean, have you guys ever seen on SourceForge, Google Code, all these millions of projects with like one member, and it's just like a description like, I'm going to write this awesome thing. Let's talk about it. You know, and like maybe there's some email discussion, and then nothing ever happens, right? It's people just talk forever and ever. It's just, you need to have a little bit of running code, just enough to draw people in, right? So they can say, there's something here for me to hack on, right? But it isn't so finished that I can't have an effect on it or influence its direction.
Right, so like we said, the sweet spot. Coherent design, have some running code, be ready to discuss design changes and backtrack. Remember, you're not your code. Be ready to take some criticism and revise what you're doing based on this direction you're going in. Be ready to accept code. That's really important, and possibly bring in other committers, people you think that are going to work well with you and your team. And most importantly, don't hide your history. Again, we talked before about people hiding their mistakes, whether on mailing lists or coding mistakes. If you do that, you're going to wind up repeating those. Okay? All right, so we have another case. Hey, guys in the back, come on in. It's okay, really.
Sit down,
we're
please.
Friendly. We're not going to call on you or anything. We're not going to insult you for... Come on, we're going to come sit back there. Are you looking for your friends? Does anybody know these people? Anyone? Yeah? Okay, then come on. Come have a seat, really.
Yeah, there are a lot of seats
it's okay. There's a lot of seats down here.
So
There you go.
let's do a
All right,
the
thanks.
seats- the
Thank you
seats
very
are here.
much.
Woo!
Come on, guys, give him a hand.
All right, yeah.
All right. That's good. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome.
Let's do a couple of quick case studies and wrap this up. We're going to be fast because we're running out of
Case studies. So,
we think Subversion, that's the project we were most involved in. We think it did a pretty good job, right? There had 2 or 3 people write the design doc for a month. That's all we did. No more than 2 or 3 people. If you have more than, this is if you want to like come out of this talk with rules of thumb, don't ever have more than 2 or 3 people write the first draft of a design doc. Because if you do, you will get stuck in discussions forever and ever and never get anything done. It's fine to get more people involved afterwards. That's fine. You iterate, right? Similar, we always talk about what with meetings, right? If you're in a group of people,
if you have more than 5 people, you cannot make a decision in a meeting. Okay? And
That's got a rule of thumb.
How many people here have ever backpacked around Europe? Okay. Did you ever go with more than 5 people? I lived in Italy for 3 years, 1 year as a student. Okay? At 6 people. Okay, we get to a street corner. Which way do we go? Okay. All right. We finally agree 10 minutes later. We go to this street corner. All right. Which way do we go? Okay? And you wind up doing this, and you just discuss over and over and over again. Again, this isn't a consensus-based situation. If you do, everyone agrees to follow one person, it's a lot easier.
But Subversion did a good job, right? We had a small group do the design doc. We all had fewer than 5 people for sort of the general decision-making at the beginning to get the prototype going. As soon as we had a prototype going that sort of did a bare minimum amount of stuff, suddenly, boom, we got all these people coming into the project, collaborating with us. It worked out really well. At one point, we took our work underground sort of early in the process because we thought we didn't want people to see what we were doing before we had a prototype. And one of the founders of the company we were working for, Brian Bellendorf, who's actually an Apache founder, he yelled at us. He said, "Get yourself out in public. You know, fine, maybe you're working on a prototype, but you cannot hide from the public." And we were very angry at him, but it turns out he was completely right. As soon as we took our day-to-day babbles onto a public list, people paid attention, and that was it. We had great collaboration. So I think it's a good example of how I would do it again if I were doing a project. What about, we have one more quick.
Another quick case study is how we write our talks. Okay, Ben and I have given over a dozen talks together over the past 5 or 6 years, and we typically take a notebook into a coffee shop. Now, not a notebook computer, an actual piece of paper, dead tree notebook with a pen or a pencil, and we just brainstorm. Usually one of us will have an idea, and we'll throw that idea out and just riff on that and try and see. And we act as a filter for each other to sort of, that's kind of we don't think it's a good idea. Let's talk about that. We come up with all these different concepts, and then we'll put them into an outline. One of us will take those home, throw them into a slide deck. The other person will obsessively refine the slide deck till it looks nice. That would be me.
But then we'll practice on somebody.
And then,
right?
and then we'll practice,
Get
right?
feedback.
We'll practice with the folks in our office. Then we'll do a local talk in Chicago. And we wind up here, Apple's developer conference, Google's developer conference, that sort of thing. So it's iterating, it's making mistakes and learning from them. It's leaving your laptop unplugged. It's having both batteries in both of your microphones go out. Okay?
Awesome. Let's sum up. Here we go. Obligatory. Excellent. So how do we say this in simple phrases? Everyone wants to be a genius. It's a secret fantasy, but it's not something you should shoot for. And if you see yourself doing it, try to pull back a little. Say, you know what? No, actually, I want to collaborate with people, not shock them with my brilliant strategy that's already finished. Reach out to people, iterate with them, collaborate with them, learn from them. Don't be afraid to fail in front of them. And while you're working with these people, pay attention to what your tools are doing and what kind of behaviors are they forcing you into as a team. And finally, pay attention to the timing that you start to collaborate with people, because that'll have a big effect on the success of your project as well.
Right? But there's a secret.
Yes.
Okay? If you actually do all of these things, people will think you're a genius.
Ah, okay? That explains it.
So that's sort of the curveball there.
Great.
Right? And that's the talk. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right? You can ask them if they want to do Q&A.
Yeah, let's ask them.
Okay. So this is where we get really interactive. Okay?
Wait before.
You have a choice now. Okay? Because we made this talk's a little bit short. You have a choice. We can have a quick Q&A, and you can get the heck out of here, and we'll shut up. Or we have another short 25-minute talk that talks about, it's called Do You Believe in the Users?
It's about user interface design, usability, focusing.
It's not like this bunch of HCI stuff. It's really about focusing on users for writing software. So if you want to hear Q&A, go ahead and raise your hand. If you want to hear the next talk, raise your hand.
We can go really fast. All right,
Okay.
everybody stand up, stretch your legs for like,
Yeah, everybody come on, stand up.
20 seconds.
We're gonna sit down, okay?
All right, are we gonna? Good idea. All right.
Oh, that's great.
All right.
All right. Put your arms out, stretch. Come on. It's like the 7th inning stretch at a ball game. All right. Okay.
Let's do the next time.
All right. Okay. Now. Okay. Okay, welcome to our talk. It's really nice to see all you guys here.
What a surprise.
I can't believe so many people just came.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Let's skip the intro slides because they've already heard.
The intro slides. You know that these are our opinions. Okay?
You know who we are already?
So here's the entire premise of this talk. So in case a nuclear bomb strikes, you'll know that this is what we came here to teach you tonight. Okay?
What is that?
As engineers, we tend to think about the steak, all right? The code, the big problems we're trying to solve, okay?
Or the tofu.
Or the tofu if you're a vegetarian, that's right, or a vegan. However, we tend to be afraid of the sizzle, okay? The point is, you can add sizzle without feeling dirty, okay? People tend to think marketing, ew, gosh, smarmy guys in suits saying, hey.
Yeah.
So you can actually have the steak and the sizzle, and it's okay.
We're going to talk about how to do that.
Right.
It's very exciting. You probably already know this stuff subconsciously, but we're going to drag it out of your brain and bring it to the forefront. And hopefully you'll have a little bit of an epiphany about this. We have 3 sections to this talk. We're going to go super quick. First, we're going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about customer service. God, it sounds boring. Then we're going to talk about...
This sounds like an awful talk.
And then we're going to talk about how to focus on users. Bzz, lasers. Marketing. So when you hear the word marketing, what is the first thing you think of? What image?
Yes! Yes! All right! See me after the talk. I have a free T-shirt for you. Okay. Okay. This guy is all sizzle, but he is no steak. Okay?
And we hate him.
We hate him. Why? Because programmers don't like being lied to. Who knows when Duke Nukem was announced? Duke Nukem Forever. When was that announced? 1997 or 98. When was it canceled? In, I think,
this year.
This year.
All right.
It was never launched, okay? This is why we don't trust marketing, okay? Pre-announcement is a bad thing, we've learned, because of things like this, but we're logical people. We're obsessed with the truth, okay?
We hang out with compilers all day, right? We want pure logical things, right? We want order, we want control, we want things to be predictable. And, you know, marketers are anything but that, right?
So I'm a member of the Apache Software Foundation. I stupidly took the role of Vice President of Public Relations for 2 years. It's the most thankless job I've ever done because everybody says it's illogical. Why do you have to do public relations? The best code should win. And
should win.
Should win, exactly. And you hear should come out of your mouth, you should automatically say something's wrong here. These analysts would come, these guys from Gartner and Forrester, you probably hear about them all the time, talking about, Gartner analysts say this, that, the other thing.
Please give us a white paper.
They come up and say, we'd like the white paper for your product, and we'd like you to answer the following questions, because they're used to going to companies who fall all over themselves to give them anything they need, so they'll say something nice about them. And our guy's response was, go screw yourself, read the mailing list. Okay? And as you might imagine, these people are, suddenly shocked that they're not being treated, so nicely. But again, it's not a logical thing, okay? Another one is trying to interpret the law, okay? If the time wasted spent interpreting open source licenses.
Have you guys been on lists? You've seen where people are debating whether one license is better or whether one license is compatible? Who is actually qualified to say that, right? I mean, we have a friend who is actually a software engineer and an intellectual property lawyer, and it is unbelievable how we'll just come in and point out how everybody is wrong all the time. But programmers have this idea that, like, oh, well, it's law, so I could just, compile it in my head like code, and it's just going to be perfectly logical. Let me tell you, the law is not logical. Even when it says on the page, do not believe it, because 5 judges may have interpreted it completely backwards, and that is what the actual law is, right?
Right.
And unless you're a lawyer, you don't know that. So it's a gigantic waste of time.
Again, this is the thing where you read something and someone says, well, it should do this. And again, that alarm should start going off right away. Okay, so we're logical, obsessed with the truth. We expect a meritocracy. Okay? We expect the best technology to win.
What's an example of the best technology that did not win?
Well, how many people in the room use Betamax?
I've heard of it.
Oh, I saw that. Exactly.
Has anyone heard of it since it was all before you were born, probably?
It's the running joke, right? The point is that it actually isn't reality, okay? Perception is 9/10 of the law, okay? Perception is reality. People get the bad first impression for your software is going to be bad. If bad rumors are started, then your software is bad. People aren't going to use it. They're not going to use it to give it a chance, okay?
A really simple example of this is subversion, right? It is not the best version control system.
What?
I know. Sacrilege, whatever. Heresy. It makes a good first impression. It goes down smooth and easy, but it is not the best system. It's got bugs. It's got problems. It just has a really shiny PR image, especially for corporations that want to stop using SourceSafe or ClearCase or whatever, right? That's where it's the biggest hit. But it is not the best, but it is perceived as the safe thing now, right? It doesn't merit it, but that's what it is. It's just a reputation it has.
So getting back to the sort of pre-announcing things, under promise and over deliver, okay? You can market without being slimy or lying, all right? There's a lot of ways of doing it. You can still get out there and tout your wares, so to speak, without being like completely over the top.
What do they say in New Orleans?
Oh, I'm from New Orleans, okay? And even though I don't talk like this now. But, in New Orleans, they talk about lagniappe. It's a little something you get for free, You buy a dozen donuts, you get another one for free. You buy 5 pounds of liver, you get another one for free. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Customers love that, though.
But we as a company, for the most part, Google avoids pre-announcing products wherever possible, because you're sort of setting yourself up for failure, right? You're already over-promising.
So when a product does come out, it's a surprise, right? We've promised nothing, but boy, we're over-delivering, and it reduces everybody's stress.
Yes,
it is great.
Yes, you get to sleep once in a while. It's really nice.
So let's talk about the second part of our talk: customer service. What do you think of when you hear the phrase customer service? What did he say?
I don't want to hear that. All right.
Right, that's what we think.
There you go. You think of the local barista making a latte for you. It's the one-on-one type of job where it's not software. Software is this one-to-many type of a thing, but it really isn't to a great extent.
Well, it's people think of it as like the worst, most horrible job to have too, right? It's sort of thought of being at the bottom of the ladder. I'm in customer service. Let me work my way up.
Work your way up to someone else. Right. So here we have a graph that we spent minutes researching here.
More minutes.
Okay, more minutes. So as time goes on, and you get more users, hopefully, right? So time going on, you have successful software, you're getting more people to use your software. So what do? You come in every day, you write more features for it, okay? You make your software more complex, okay? So the problem is that as you get past that initial burst of users, you start getting users that are less technically savvy, okay? So when you combine increasing users with more complexity, with users that have less tech savviness, despair increases exponentially, okay?
We measured this ourselves.
We measured this very carefully. But the point of this is that you need to listen to users and not condescend.
This is really hard to do, especially for software engineers. Or maybe you've just had this problem, like if you're trying to explain software to, folks south of Green, right? It's just like you don't want to condescend, right? You want to listen. You don't want to pretend like they're dumb, because they're not dumb. They just have a different view of reality, right? And you need to change the way you use your words. But you can do it in a way that's not mean or it's not condescending. It's actually I've seen it happen. It's a rare skill. It's something you have to cultivate, but it's something you shoot for, especially if you're working on software that has a large target audience that isn't just a compiler, for example, right? Small audience, they're like you. Bigger audience would be something like an IM client. Everyone uses that, right? And you need to think about who are the users, how am I going to talk to them, right? You can't talk to them like other people on the project.
Right. So you want to find a way to let people who are using your software participate, okay? The point is that even if they're not writing code, they often just want to be heard, okay? So one way of doing it is letting them participate in an issue tracker or clicking a file a bug link or I have a problem link or something like that. And what you can do with this, if you're putting all this into an issue tracker, and you have, especially if you have users going through and taking a look at these and say, hey, check these out, see if there's anything here that before you file an issue that's already bugging you, is you can look for themes across these issues that are frequently, in Google Code, we let people star issues that are important to them. So we have our own, we dog food it, as we call it, our product. So code.google.com/p/support has an issue tracker in it. Yep. And if you look on there, you'll see, if you sort by number of stars, you'll see some things that are in high demand amongst our users.
But it gives us an insight into the things that are the most bothersome to users, right? It's not just what we think is the most important thing to work on. What are the users? What are they telling you, right? Look for these general themes. Right. That's how you show that you're listening. And then maybe blog about it. Say, hey, we noticed this is a problem. We're working on X, Y, Z. Don't give them a release date, but at least acknowledge that it's something that you're working on.
But some people are afraid to do this because they feel like they're going to lose control and they're going to suddenly have to start writing every feature that anyone ever asks for, and that's not the case, okay? And you should be strongly encouraged not to try and do everything, be everything to everyone. We want to do fewer things better, and on Google Code we talk about we talk about targeting the 80%.
The 80%, right? I mean, we want it to be easy to use for 80% of people. There are 20% of the people out there who are going to find some critical feature missing, or some little switch they wish were there, but it would increase the complexity so much that it would not be worth it, right?
Well, it would be confusing the other 80%.
Exactly.
Right?
So just stop trying to be everything to everybody. Well,
there is some software out there that is everything to everybody. It's called Emacs. So quick question. How many people in the room use Emacs? How many people in the room use VI or Vim?
Wow.
Wow!
That's amazing.
How many people authored VI or Vim?
Awesome!
Yay! All right.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do that. That's awesome. So, all right. Now, Emacs and VIP, fight. All right?
They're outnumbered.
You're totally outnumbered. This is the second time that's happened that I've had Emacs users so woefully outnumbered.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
So
anyway, Emacs is everything to a very few people. It works okay. I'm an Emacs user.
Sorry.
But so here's an example of something else that is, what the hell is this? Okay?
It's everything to everyone.
I'm going to pull out my surround sound system and watch TV on this puppy one day.
In the dark with a flashlight.
In the dark with a flashlight. And wait, there's more of these things, okay? We found another one. All right?
Competing model.
So, yes, these are for, if you're stuck in the wilderness and need a television or something. I don't know. But this isn't something that's really going to be useful. It's not something you're going to use, okay? It does a whole lot of different things very poorly.
What's an example of something that does a lot of things pretty well for most people? Hey, look at that.
A toaster oven. Okay?
What can you do with a toaster oven?
You can toast things. You can throw a bagel in there. You can do a lot of different things, but it doesn't boil water. I gave this talk once. Somebody mailed me a picture of a toaster with a radio built in. Please don't send me any pictures, okay? But quite seriously, aside from being everything to everyone, another really important aspect of serving your customers, of focusing your users here, is something that people don't often think about.
Irreplaceable resource.
An irreplaceable resource. It's kind of like a bank account that has this bizarre feature that you can actually do the wrong thing and drain it immediately.
Right. I mean, you put pennies into it slowly every day, right? You do one bad move and it's gone. The whole thing's empty.
And people do this frequently by succumbing to short-term gains, and they wind up with a long-term loss. All right?
That's very hard to. I mean, it's tempting, right? I mean,
it is tempting
because wow, especially salespeople, right? Got to make their quarterly targets. Let's just add this feature. Let's just compromise in this one way so we can get this one sale, right? And now in the long term, you're you screwed forever. You actually have a good anecdote about this about your grandfather.
How many people here own cars?
Yay!
Okay. How many people here who own cars trust their mechanics? Okay.
Wow.
You guys are never going to tell anybody who your mechanic is, right? This is like a secret you'll take to your grave. Right. People typically don't trust mechanics or people that work in their cars because they often take advantage of the fact that they don't understand what's going on under the hood. My grandfather ran a Firestone store for 35 years in New Orleans. Not a noble profession by any means, but he called this mailboxing. When you come in to get a flat tire fixed and someone come up and say, your radiator fluid needs the zip stop flippity-flopped, and that's really bad, and it's only $85, and while we're in there, your brake fluid is leaking, and blah, blah, blah. And people would be afraid of getting hurt or dying in their cars, and so they wind up paying this money, but they just have this gut feeling of badness.
Well, it's kind of destroyed the reputation of the whole industry, right? I mean, It's become so commonplace now that nobody trusts anybody anymore.
And if people do find a mechanic that they trust, they'll go back to him over and over again, right? So, but we have a technical example of that.
Well, I mean, again, we bring up subversion because we know it, but one of the things I think subversion, the reason it's sort of long-term stable and popular, especially with corporations, is that from the very beginning we decided that we would have very strict promises about the APIs. That we would say, version 1.x of a client and 1.y of a server for any values of x and y will always work and always talk to each other. And once we introduce a new API, we're never going to get rid of it. We might deprecate it, but it won't go away, right? And so having that kind of trust with people who build tools on top of subversion or corporations that invest in it, the trust grows and grows with every release.
Well, and we get tremendous number of tools built around subversion, right? Yeah. Some of them are really, really fabulous. The next thing about listening to users is that sometimes what they say is not what they want.
Well, this is what I talked about before, right? This careful art of trying to translate what people are saying. Non-technical folks are explaining the problem, and you're trying to understand, and you're trying to translate back to them. It's a hard problem. I mean, you probably do it with your parents on the phone, right? Trying to fix their computer over the phone or whatever the problem is. Something we all run into. Well, actually, you have a great story about this too.
Well, I have a story about it, okay? My grandmother, okay, who is now 86 years old, my grandfather died about 10 years ago. And 3 or 4 years back, she said, we were talking about my computers or something. She said, your grandfather's old computer, a Mac Classic from 1991, is that still any good? Is that still worth anything? I said, oh, well, it doesn't have an internet connection. It's black and white. It's got a floppy drive. It's really an antique, and we should probably just recycle it somewhere. She says, oh, okay, because I only ever turn it on nowadays when I need to sharpen a pencil.
What?
What? Exactly. What? My brain pops out of my head, flips around 6 times, and I say, I'm going to hate myself for this, but I've got to ask. I've got to get to the bottom of this, right? What is going on? So every week, she'd take her 3 pencils, and she'd go into my grandfather's office, which is all still there, and she would turn on the power strip that ran the electric pencil sharpener. This poor little Mac would beep and start booting up very slowly. She'd sharpen her pencils and then kill the damn thing. Midway through boot. So
for years.
For years. Now, rest assured, I liberated this poor Mac and put a bullet through it because it was just utter computer torture. But the serious point is that sometimes what people say, they have a completely different worldview and a completely different mental model of this piece of software that inside out. They're only looking, the way I look at this desk is probably fundamentally different than the carpenter who built it does, okay?
Let's talk about another principle of dealing with people, and that is, how do you delight them? I mean, this is a very specific choice that we're using. We say delight the users, like surprise them in a happy way. Simple example, right? You would not believe the amount of email Google gets about the doodles that show up every few weeks. It is unbelievable, right? Because it's just one of these little things. You turn on your computer. You're not a technical user. You just want to search for something. Most people think Google's just part of their computer or something. And oh look, there's a cute little picture. Oh my God, that's amazing. And they start emailing each other about it and blogging. I don't know what they do, but it's incredible. It's delight, right? We have another example of delight, which is YouTube.
YouTube. You guys remember this?
You guys remember this?
Okay. This was fabulous. I was just out of my mind with hysterics when I did this.
Let me share for those who don't know what happened.
Last year, April 1st, every video on the front page of YouTube took you to the Rick Astley video. Every single last one. Now, so this was just purely for fun, but sometimes you can delight your users to get them to do something, all right?
I love this.
A lot of places that have you sign up or create an account, they often want you to put your picture there, okay? And there's this one small company that they were getting nobody to ever put their picture up. So they decided they were going to put a new default picture. This was their default picture for everyone. Okay?
It was so effective.
95% of their users changed their picture immediately. Okay?
And they were delighted.
And they were delighted. By gosh. Okay, so let's move on to the last part.
Last part, focusing on users.
Focusing on your users. So what do you think of when we talk about focusing on users? Okay, well, we think of orbiting brain lasers, of course.
No. Slide.
Next slide, sorry. Okay.
We want to talk about how do you make your software usable. And if users can't even try your software in the first place, like if it's this sort of first impression, if they can't get in the door, how are you going to ever use your software at all? I guess we talk about first impressions. We talk about, it's like a storefront, right? You need to make it attractive. You need to make the door easily accessible. One example, at least for me, I had is, the first day I learned Unix, I was 17, it was 1990, and I came in to an internship and I said, what's Unix? And they all laughed at me. And then I logged into my Sun terminal and I said, how do I edit a file? And they said, ha ha ha, you're going to have to choose Emacs or VI. And so I, okay, ha ha ha. Right? So I started VI and I couldn't type anything. I just had no idea it was good because I had only ever seen WordPerfect, right? And I'm like, what's going on? And someone had to come over and show me how to quit. And I ran Emacs. I could type, and I was like, wow, this is great. And then I just
still couldn't quit.
I still couldn't quit. That's all right. But it's silly, right? I mean, both systems are crazy powerful, but that one first 10-second impression, that's the reason I became an Emacs user. It's silly, right? But it's true. And I think that goes for a lot of other people. Think about the software you write. What is that first 10, 20 seconds? What's it going to be like?
So think about the accessibility of something. Okay, so Perl and PHP are great examples of things. Okay, there's not a lot to learn, but you can really start using them quickly, very easily. Okay, there's a very low slope, whatever you call it, learning curve, right? Emacs's learning curve is like a cliff, but I like to look at it as you learn a lot in a very short period of time, right? Okay, so another example is that when Leopard, the new version of Mac OS X came out, there wasn't a Fink installer for it. You had to build it all from scratch instead of some package, and you were much less likely to use that because it was just a lot harder. So we got a couple more graphs here that we've developed over minutes.
More scientific research.
So if on the one side you have my grandmother, and on the other side of this curve you have Donald Knuth, right, who knows a few things about computers, the usability of your software is really going to affect where the line is drawn through that. And everything to the right side of the line is going to be people who can use your software. And to the left side of the line will be people that can't use your software because it's not accessible.
Naturally, being version control people, that's the domain we like to talk about. So we like to think that Subversion is fairly easy to use, right, for most folks. We draw it a little bit to the left. Maybe just, most people can figure it out, right? I mean, non-technical people, I can give them Tortoise SVN, which is this, nice Windows GUI integrated into Windows Explorer. They understand, commit, update, not too bad. They don't even know what's going on, but they understand what to do if I give them the instructions. Right. So,
another example is
Git.
Let's just use Git as an example. Yeah. Okay. So people who use Git tend to really love it because they feel it's so brilliant that they could ever figure it out. Okay.
They can get it to do anything at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So the sort of middle of the road example we have of this is what we currently use is Mercurial or HG, which sort of falls. It's not quite as easy as Subversion, but we think it's considerably easier than Git. And this usability overall is important because the thing to remember is that you guys are going to an awesome engineering school and you're hacking stuff out. But the majority of the world isn't awesome people going to awesome engineering schools hacking stuff out. They're just sort of working in a corporation somewhere, writing the software that is going to eat your credit card number.
You would be amazed at the number of people who are work in software development shops, don't use version control at all, or if they do, they use source safe because that's what came in the box and they barely understand what's going on with it. Right? It's just not interesting to them, right?
Right. So what we're talking about here is barrier to entry. If users can't try something, you have no users. Your first impressions are really important, like the storefront. And we'll talk briefly about the fact that, let's talk about getting in that door, right? Ben said you want to be able to just walk right in the door. What if you have to fill out this form before you walk in this door, right? Are you going to do that? Websites do this all the time. Hey, you want to use this? Okay, fill all this out. Some people have figured this out and lowered the barrier significantly.
Has anyone heard of Trip It? Ever played? Oh,
Okay.
one or two people. Okay.
Well, if you're traveling a lot like we do, Trip It is really invaluable. When you make a reservation for your flight, for your hotel, your rental car, all this stuff, you'll get a confirmation email. Well, you just start forwarding these emails to plans@tripit.com. And then after a few minutes, it'll send you back an email that said, hey, I've worked up your itinerary. Click here to take a look at it. And you go into the site, and then the first time it says, pick a password or something like that.
Yeah.
And then in your email address is your username, and it gives you this really beautiful itinerary with maps and other information of things nearby.
It's amazing, right? But I mean, look at the barrier to entry. It's just forward an email, right? It's incredible. If everything could be this simple, I mean, it's just something. It's something to admire.
Right.
I really am amazed.
Well, think about search engine, right? If you like Google, you use Google. If you decide Google isn't working, you go somewhere else. Anybody see what happened in January this year when there was a mistake that we made with our malware detection, which marked every site on the web as malware? Anybody actually get that message? Okay.
Yeah.
You know what happened? Yahoo's traffic doubled during that time.
For those few hours.
Because there was no barrier to entry there. Just type in, anybody could type it into the search engine, right? So again, focus on making it easy for users to try things out.
So we're going to talk about users versus usage. This is something we argue about with product managers at Google. And they say, oh, that's awesome. How many users do you have? Oh, I got 5 billion users. I got 10 billion. And then we say, wait. Users is the wrong metric here. What you want to see is what is your usage, right? Who cares if 1 billion people logged in or signed up for your service if they all stopped coming back a week later, right?
What about number of downloads? That's a great metric.
Right, exactly. Do you care about how many times people downloaded your product, or do they care about whether they're actually using your product? For example, like Google Toolbar, right? Lots of downloads, but what we actually care about is how many people are using Toolbar all the time in their web browser. That's what's important to us, and we notice trends going up and down. Another example is, everyone's probably got some Unix in their life somewhere if you're a computer science major. Here's an example of a piece of software, AR. You ever seen it sitting in /bin? Right? Anyone even know what it does? I mean, it's a really old tool. Look, there's an example. It's installed on millions of computers, right? Every Mac in the world, right? But
nobody uses it.
No usage at all. So it's just kind of be aware of the difference between these two things.
Right.
And if you can, try to figure out how to measure the usage, not the users.
Okay.
It's a little harder.
So the next sort of an admonition for you,
Rant.
okay, and a rant and an encouragement is, for the sake of your users, don't be lazy. Okay, the 5 minutes you save yourself could cost your users many, many hours. Okay, here's an example of programmers being lazy. Okay, that's lazy. All right, that's bad design. Okay, here's an example of laziness. How many people know all the command line options to tar? Okay, all right. And this is one that makes me completely and utterly insane, okay? When you go to a web page and you cannot enter your credit card number with spaces, dashes, or anything you damn well please.
It's so hard to parse spaces out. Oh my God, let's make the users do it.
No one's ever written a strip function or anything like that.
No.
Exactly. So hyphenated last name.
Oh, yeah, it's hard. That's me.
Right there.
Don't
have a hyphenated last name.
Middle name and refusing to use an initial.
Ooh, terrible.
We have some issues to deal with in this crowd here. All right, good. Get mad, right? Okay.
Let's talk about speed, because we only have 5 minutes left. So speed matters a lot. Here's another brilliant graph based on our team of researchers. So as you work through a project, again, you get more users, more and more users appearing over time. But you notice what happens is, as a project matures, the number of users, or maybe the usage, sort of tapers off. It sort of flattens out. And of course, the marketing people come in, we need more sizzle. We got to market it more. But really, here's what you got to notice is something's going on. What's actually happening is your latency is getting worse, probably because you're adding more complexity all the time, like we talked about before. And what you'll notice is if you fix your latency, well, despair goes up, right? Once again, despair increases, and you start losing users. So latency is so important. It's something we totally obsess about at Google, in fact, because it makes a huge difference in usability. Let's say, and usage. Well, you do the math. I'll let you do
Okay, so do the math. So let's say that you have a good product, you have 1 million users. That's awesome, you're doing great, okay? Each user does 20 requests a day, and each request takes 500 milliseconds longer than it should. Okay, over the course of 365 days, you've wasted 116 years. So please don't kill your users, okay? So That's our exploitation. Now, another thing to use.
Complexity.
Complexity.
Well, I want you to.
You want me to do this?
I like this.
Okay.
I like
so
that you do it.
I need, again, I'm going to ask for audience participation here. How many people has ever heard of Eudora?
It's in a glass
Wow.
case in the hall.
It's in the
right?
glass case in the hallway. How many people have ever used Eudora?
All right.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
I
right.
used to use it too.
I'm sorry. Okay. Anyone remember Eudora's preference panel? Okay.
All right.
I like to ask you to count with me, okay? How many panes were in their preference panel? This is 1, 2, let's hear it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, faster, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. What the hell is a mood watch? You needed more complexity for a mood watch. Okay, we got to keep going. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 27 separate preference panes. Oh my God, is that unnecessarily complex for a user?
Let's take the counterexample, right? Here's something that on the surface is incredibly simple and easy to use, right? What's actually going on under the hood? It's really complicated under the hood, right? And there's a lot of hardware going on under there. And what I think, at least we've talked about this, the real breakthrough here is that, okay, fine, having music on a device is an inherently complex thing. But what I think Apple did with the iPod is the breakthrough here is they took all the complexity and they moved it off to a computer where it's actually able to handle the complexity. You've got a mouse, you've got a keyboard, you've got a CD drive, right? You can rip all the complexity instead of trying to bury that on the device, right? The device is just a very simple playback.
So they decompose a really complex problem.
Yeah.
Another example is search engine. Pick your favorite search engine here. All right. This is an illusion, okay? This is an illusion of simplicity because only thing you really need on this screen actually to get your work done is this. Well, you don't even need the I'm feeling lucky button or the logo or actually anything but the box to type into, okay? But this simple little text box is hiding, several data centers worth of many, many computers and some of the most incredible, hardware and software in the world. Incredibly complex things hidden behind a simple text box.
Last concept here is abstractions. Abstractions are a very powerful tool for hiding complexity for users who maybe not be so technical, right? One example, I love it. The problem with abstractions is that they will leak. And a lot of programmers freak out about this. They say, oh no, we're letting users see what's actually going on under the hood. We got to hide it. We got to tighten down. And our feeling is, no, actually, let it leak a little bit. An example, leaks happen, like for example, your web browser, right? Non-technical users see 404, page not found, all the time. That is a leaky abstraction, right? But they learn what it means. It's not the end of the world. Right. They are plugin not found, example, right? So instead of trying to fight the leakiness of your abstraction, just go with the flow and sort of twist it and turn it into a feature, right? It's a power feature. It's something that your powerful users can benefit to their advantage. Right? Hey, it's an API maybe, right?
Right.
For example, Apache.
Yeah, let your power users access. So Apache, for example, you look at the top, there's a little section of an Apache httpd.conf. It's a way of configuring your web server. If that's not good enough for you, you can write whole modules, either in C or Perl or whatever, that can do all sorts of fancy stuff. Google Calendar is a fun example. This is the kind of thing that my mom uses. It's really simple. It's very straightforward.
But it's got an API too.
It's got an API.
People can. Folks.
So we're out of time here. We're going to wrap up with two brief anecdotes. And the first one is a story. My mother-in-law, 85 years old, went to pick her up one day, and she's with some of her old lady friends. And she says, oh, I want you to meet my son-in-law. He works for Google. And this old woman looks at her and looks at me and said, I didn't know anybody worked there. Okay? This was
part of my computer,
This was
right?
an illusion of simplicity. She didn't realize that Google, it's like Soylent Green, it's people.
But it goes the other way. It goes the other way too.
It goes the other way.
Well,
right?
you tell the story too.
So one of our product managers, a couple years ago, everybody was going to Disney World, Disneyland out in California, and he told his aunt that they were all going to Disneyland, and she said, you can't all go to Disneyland. And he said, what do you mean we can't all go to Disneyland? She said, well, who's going to do my searches for me? Yeah. Okay? Again, this illusion, people have these different models of the way things work, right?
Let's sum it up, because we're out of time.
Summary.
You need more than code, right? You need to actually pay attention to the usability and users. Put that little bit of sizzle in there without losing your dignity, right?
That's right, and that's the end of our double feature. We don't have time for Q&A, but thanks for sitting through it, everybody.
Yes.